Okay, good afternoon. My name is Visar Vokrri. I'm researcher at Riinvest Institute in Kosovo. I'm also a teacher of international economics at Riinvest College, also here in Kosovo. I'm currently a PhD candidate in economics, and recently I was engaged in a couple of projects related to accountability and transparency related to capital investments in Kosovo. Actually, the major investments that were done in Kosovo during these years. I was focused in 5 main capital projects, starting from construction of both highways, actually Route 6 and 7. Route 7 is now completed and is fully functional, while Route 6 is still under construction. And another interesting project that was that is now being concessioned is international airport in Kosovo. Actually, the only international airport that we have. The privatization of electricity distribution and supply was also finalized 3 years ago, and now we have a private operator when it comes to both distribution and supply of electricity in Kosovo. And we have telecommunication services. I mean, 2 failed attempts. Unfortunately, Post Telecommunication of Kosovo is still a public company. Also, as already said, we have been trying to privatize them 2 times, but both attempts have failed, mainly for bad governance and other issues related to handling these vital projects for the telecommunication sector in Kosovo. And another project that we are currently working on, actually, and I'm one of the main authors, is concession process of the ski resort, the only ski resort that we have here in Kosovo, which is so-called Brezovica. I'm not going to provide any detail about Brezovica ski resort, since we are in the process and we have not published the report yet. But what I can say at this moment, and most of the findings actually are similar to other 4 projects that I've just mentioned. When it comes to the main findings from these studies that we have been conducted and I was engaged in, I can group them in 4 or 5 main categories. The first one and the most important was lack of transparency. This was a common issue in all capital investment projects that we have studied. Another issue was also the transaction cost, the high transaction cost that we have actually paid in order to accomplish these projects. I mean, lack of feasibility studies was another issue, another actually very important issue that was present in all projects that I have listed in my previous slide. And I will say something about monitoring process of these projects, and the social or corporate social responsibility. I would say irresponsibility, because the companies that were mainly engaged in these transactions actually was not we're not taking care about social aspects at all. The increase in public demand for the accountability of public servants at all levels in Kosovo, I think, has emerged from greater acceptance of democratic values. The reasoning for holding public servants accountable lies in the very nature of their relationship with the public resources. They have a relationship of trust with these resources. Public would like to know how do they discharge their responsibilities with regard to this trust. Although, on a first look, the idea of holding public servants, public managers, I would say, accountable seems attractive. A closer look unravels several issues which require further discussion and also policy interventions for making the concept of accountability and transparency operational, actually. In the case of highway, because I'm not going to go in further details in explaining the concepts of either transparency or accountability, I would rather provide some information from the main findings regarding these 5 capital projects in Kosovo. When it comes to transparency, I mean, I will say something about each project individually. Kosovo government in recent years has focused the majority of capital investments on the construction of 2 major highways, namely constructing the Route 7, which connects Kosovo and Serbia in the north, and the Route 6, as I already said, which is under construction now, links Kosovo and Albania in the south. The construction of these 2 roads, in fact, includes also besides linking Kosovo with Albania and Kosovo with Macedonia. In fact, it also these 2 roads will serve as the main transport networks in Southeast Europe, since we are, our neighbors would connect to each other using mainly these roads. The way the contracts were made for these 2 roads have been and remains an important discussion topic in the Kosovan society, remarkably due to the socio-economic importance that these 2 significant capital projects have, as well as due to the high financial and opportunity cost. Construction of the Route 7, the route that has been already constructed and is fully operational, costed Kosovo budget around 830 million euros. Again, this is an approximate value, since the contract was never made public, and the general public was not granted access to any document or procurement documentation regarding this project. While the other one, the Route 6, is estimated to cost around 660 million euros, which in total would make cost Kosovo's budget some 1.5 billion euros, which is equivalent to the Kosovo's budget for the year 2016, more or less. A key characteristic of these two projects was lack of transparency shown by the government. The processes have been closed to the opinion, public opinion, and many questions have remained unanswered. Transparency shown in both of these projects was to a minimum extent, as the wide public opinion was very, very little informed about the course of these projects, including contractual arrangements. No details, as already said, were made were made public. When it comes to the airport, the only international airport that we have here in Kosovo, the selection process itself led to dissatisfaction for many participants in this process. One of the competing companies has deemed that this process was non-transparent and also was manipulated, while the winner consortium, which is Limak, a Turkish company, and Airport de Lyon in France. It was the winner was also considered to be an experienced in the field, even though the Airport de Lyon was part of the consortium, but still the major shareholder of the consortium was Limak company, which is basically a construction company. So I think it was the consortium is unexperienced in this field, and this was actually the reason why some other companies, including the company that the one company that complained about the process, withdrew from the race in this concession. It was mainly because since in the beginning the process seems to be manipulated actually, and the winner was known quite in advance. The withdrawal of the company, of one of the companies, a consortium actually, that was interested for a concession of the airport, had left Kosovo's government in the process of decision making and selection between the two remaining companies. The one that is now the winner, actually the company that is actually operating the airport, and another consortium that was competing until the end. Selecting the winner from only two responsible companies was actually contrary to the law on public procurement, which clearly specifies that contracting authority should have in front of them at least 3 responsible bids. Alternatively, in given cases, they should request clarification from the public procurement agency, which is something that the government never did. They rushed actually in publishing the winning company in order to make sure that they will close the deal as soon as possible. Here the acronym CAD stands for Kosovo Electricity Distribution and Supply. The process of including the private sector in the energy sector of Kosovo, particularly the privatization process of both distribution and supply, carried out by Kosovo government in 2013, created a public polarization, I would say, into pro and against fronts, two main fronts. Since the sector has a fundamental importance to the quality of life of Kosovo citizens, the way that privatization was done and the outcome of this vital process have justifiably attracted the greatest attention. Regardless of the concerns that have constantly been raised, no genuine debate has taken place, which in the first place would be initiated basically by public institutions such as the parliament or government, with other stakeholders included. In fact, government has given an impression of having attempted to keep this matter inside its closed circles. A situation such as this should have been overcome by holding wide public debates in the society. But on the other hand, the government has rapidly completed the privatization process and amid lack of crucial consensus between the relevant stakeholders in the society in general. The process as a whole has been characterized by lack of transparency and inclusive debate, amid an impression created that the government was trying to hold this debate mainly within its as already said, mainly within its relative close circles. The process has also been accompanied by limited access to official documents. Regardless that the civil society in general was trying to make the process a little bit more transparent by systematically asking for access in all relevant procurement documents as far as electricity distribution and supply was concerned. The situation with telecommunication sector is a little bit different, since as I said earlier, telecommunication in Kosovo still remains public. We had two attempts. The government tried to privatize the telecommunication services in 2008, but it failed. And again in 2000, and actually in 2008, they first initiated the privatization process, but until 2013, two serious attempts to privatize the telecommunication services failed. As with other transactions, public in general also in this case was not granted full access in procurement documentation or tendering packages. The government contracted a transaction advisor in order to prepare all transaction documentation which were not made public, and access actually was very, very, very limited. These advisors exerted considerable influence throughout the process, in particular during the first phase of privatization. Actually, they influenced and determined the process in a biased manner, which then led to the failure of privatization in the first round. Taking into consideration the entire process of privatization of post-telecommunication of Kosovo, a broad consensus of Kosovo politics was lacking regarding its privatization, which has exceedingly polarized the public opinion. In addition, the entire process has revealed a biased approach, as already said, hence favoring certain companies and violating the public procurement law and selection criteria that were actually prepared by transaction advisors hired by the government. Consequently, we ended up with a winning consortium. I'm saying winning since it was announced that the consortium, this is the winning consortium at that time. But again, this attempt failed since the company, the consortium actually failed to comply with pre-qualification requirements. One of the most evident violations was that bidder actually had to demonstrate that the value one of the most evident violation was that the bidder or in its major partner must demonstrate that under management assets, the value of assets should have been at least $750 million for the year 2012, or it has raised funds in total of at least $200 million during the last 7 years. But according to the financial reports of the winning consortium, it can be seen that it was registered with the company. The winning consortium was registered with an initial capital of 25,000 euros, and in 2011 had a profit of only 2,500 euros. Most of these capital projects have been accompanied by high transaction costs. Actually, what we have paid for construction of the highway for the first one, the Route 7, was very high price compared to average prices for 1 per kilometer. Actually, as we can see in this figure here, is that Kosovo actually tops the list of some regional countries and also other Western European countries. Actually, we have paid around 11.5 million euros per kilometer, which is a much higher price compared to highways with similar characteristics in Europe. I mean that we have a very flat terrain, so we cannot compare with Austria, let's say, but let's say Slovenia, Croatia here. The countries in this region have paid much less when it comes to construction of their highways. When it comes to airports, again, it's something that It costed a lot to Kosovars actually. According to the agreement that concessionaire signed with the government, the latter was supposed to get 39.4% of the total income, overall gross income, as a form of contribution. So the concessionaire had, for the next 20 years, as for the 20-year concession period, has to share 39, almost 40% of income, gross income, as a form of contribution to the government of Kosovo. But then this turns out to be this agreement turned out to be the source of turnover underperformance phenomena in the airport. Post-concession initial data show that the concessionaire intentionally and in full awareness attempts to reduce turnover through suspicious actions like signing fictitious contracts with hardly justifiable prices with third parties affiliated with winning consortium. Some of the reported cases include contracts that concessionaire signed with third parties by subcontracting services like advertising spaces and also other spaces inside the terminal for catering services, but with very low prices. So on the other hand, the price that that the private operator paid for the whole Kosovo electricity distribution and the supply system was only 26.3 million euros, which was not proportional with the value of its assets, let alone previous investments that have been systematically conducted in electricity and distribution, and supply company in Kosovo. When it comes to telecommunication services, it seems that the process was conducted in a very I would say wrong manner, since a decision of the Kosovo government in 2010 to hold all future investments in PTK has actually a negative effect, since it has contributed in decreasing the overall revenues of the public company that is offering telecommunication services in Kosovo. It seems there are some allegations that this was done intentionally in order to decrease the value of the PTK, so the new owner has to pay a much lower price, has to offer a much lower price in order to privatize the company. Again, there are some allegations that some of the government officials, high government officials, are affiliated with this company, the company that was announced as a winning bidder, but then the whole process had to be to be cancelled. Due to the above decision that we have just mentioned, in 2004, the net profit of the company has shrunk for almost 50%, from 33 to 16.5 million euros in 33.4 in 2010, down to 16.5 million euros in 2004. And also the lack of investments, as a result of the decision, of the government decision to halt investments in PTK, caused a significant decrease of market share of this company from 70% in 2010 down to 53% of the market share in 2015. So the competition, since there is one private operator functioning in Kosovo, and the public company is lacking behind in terms of investments in latest technologies, so they lost a significant amount of market share. I think I have to try to speak a bit more. I have to be quick now, since we are running out of time. 30 minutes have just passed, so I will try to be as quick as possible. Feasibility studies are supposed to determine the viability of business venture in a specific area or sector of business. When it comes to public companies in Kosovo, the law on public-private partnerships stipulates that any project initiated by the government should be preceded by a feasibility study. Before signing of the contract for the construction of the Route 7, the first highway constructed in Kosovo, there was no feasibility study at all, which this feasibility study actually could well have been used for as a foundation for public discussion and debates, which, as already said, were actually missing. The only public discussion in place at that time was actually by the opposition, but nevertheless, the project financial feasibility has in no case been discussed, and the government proceeded without any prior analysis regarding the feasibility of this huge financial project in Kosovo. But in the case of the Route 6, the highway that is under construction now, feasibility study was done apparently, but was not available for the public. So the public is not aware about the financial implications of this project. Similarly, I mean, also the concession of airport, even though it was done via public-private partnership, and as already mentioned a few seconds ago, the law clearly specifies that there should be a feasibility study before any transaction as far as public companies are concerned. But there was no thorough analysis on the ownership transformation first, and also an analysis which could discuss concession modalities. When it comes to electricity distribution and supply, the decision of privatizing actually both divisions, distribution and supply, since they were supposed to be privatized or sold separately, but without actually considering implications in a sense of competition in the energy sector and other implications. The decision was not preceded by any analysis. Both of them were sold to a single company, and they were only later on, after the privatization has been finalized and the company was already contracted, distribution and supply then were separated. But still, they are owned by the same company. In addition, feasibility study was a precondition that was clearly imposed by the Parliament of Kosovo. There was, and it has been voted actually, but the government of Kosovo decided to completely ignore the decision and go ahead with the privatization process without any thorough analysis. The government also with telecommunications sector failed to provide necessary explanation and reasonable explanation regarding its decision to privatize the company's shares, the postal communication company shares. The decision was to privatize only 75%, but this decision was not a decision that stemmed in a feasibility from a feasibility study that was supposed to be conducted well in advance. Again, the parliament, the legislative body in Kosovo, was systematically ignored in the decision-making process throughout the privatization process. Attempted processes for attempted privatization processes of the postal telecommunication sector in Kosovo. After these transactions were conducted, and also throughout the process, there was supposed to be a monitoring mechanism which would ensure a fair, transparent, and accountable process. When building highways, Kosovo government in both cases contracted actually an international company to monitor the construction of highways, rather than engaging its internal capacities. They decided to hire an international company. Interestingly, the company is affiliated with Bechtel and Enka, which was the construction company that that actually was contracted by the government to build both highways. Contract was purely not properly monitored and supervised by Kosovo institutions. Actually, the government had no interest to do that, since they were clearly interested to not monitor the project, since they knew from the very beginning what the construction company is going to do, and what would be the cost actually of the project. But again, they have no interest in the monitoring. That's why they contracted such a company to do that, in order to make just to make the public and also the parliament to make them aware that the government is doing something about this. But on the other hand, it is something that it was not properly conducted. Actually, there is no report that shows how the construction process has been done. In the case of the Route 7, the highway that is already finished. This pure monitoring mechanism, this poor monitoring mechanism actually have given full freedom to the main contractor to exploit local resources. Actually, they exploited human resources, also local companies that have been subcontracted by them. During the concession process of the airport, the government of Kosovo was supposed to establish a project management unit, which was a clear legal requirement. This activity, the monitoring activity, actually was conducted by the private-public partnership unit, which is a sort of department inside the Ministry of Finance, and clearly it is controlled by the government. So the project management unit was supposed to be an independent body, which whose main duty task was to monitor actually the concession contract, the implementation of the concession contract by the concessionaire. Failure to establish this mechanism actually constitutes procedural violations, and it provides actually an opportunity for unrestrained and unverified behaviors for the concessionaire. Since electricity distribution and supply is similar to PTK and also International Airport have a public company's status. They are supposed to have parliament's legislative bodies approval before any important decision was taken. Unfortunately, Kosovo's parliament was not involved at all in the monitoring of privatization process. Parliament's role was merely limited to just passing government decision with a simple majority, since the political party that was governing country at that time actually had a simple majority inside the parliament, so they could have just passed these decisions without any clarification or explanation provided by the government as the main decision as the main decision making body when it comes to privatization of public companies. And consequently, I mean, the role of the parliament as supervising mechanism has been avoided by the government, since they could have done that although the opposition was systematically trying to stop the whole process, but this simple majority allowed the government to proceed with privatization process in this case. Politicization of managing structures in post and telecommunication of Kosovo had also prevented a monitoring of companies' performance, and also the process of privatization. Policy and monitoring unit of public enterprises, which is another body within the Ministry of Economic Development in Kosovo, has never conducted proper monitoring activities in PREs. And this is also the case with PTK. This mechanism lacks professional staff, and also I would say there was no political willingness in order to empower this these mechanisms in order to ensure fully transparent and accountable privatization processes as far as public companies are concerned. Finally, another issue that was very common in all these capital, we are calling them capital investment projects, was lack of social responsibility. Companies that were engaged in all these transactions were shown lack of serious corporate responsibility, regardless of having contracted two projects worth 1.5 billion euros. Bactalenka, the contractor, didn't engage in any social activity, also known as corporate social responsibilities activities. On the other hand, construction workers were forced to work 12 hours a day and with very low remuneration packages. They were compensated only €1, on average actually 1.3 euros per hour, which was way much lower compared to the average in similar industry average. Despite the fact that they have, I would say, they have contracted huge projects, the company did not show any interest in engaging in social activities. Similarly, with the concession of airports, during the first 3 years of operation under the new concessionaire, there have been serious employee rights violation, and also violation of labor law, with interdiction of employee syndicate, actually, which was supposed to be as a main representative body of employees who are currently working at the airport. In addition, there were political employment. Political employment at the airport was an issue that was raised by civil society in general, but the concessionaire, actually, in close cooperation with the government, managed to actually the concessionaire were in cooperation with the government employed mainly politically affiliated persons, and on the other hand, they have been they violated the other employees' rights. So the government in general was not interested as far as their people, those who were politically affiliated with the political parties in the government, were employed and they were treated well. In addition, the concessionaire in a lot of cases actually favored certain airline companies, mainly Turkish companies, which consequently forced other serious companies to exit. One of them was actually British Airways. Similar situation is also with electricity and also telecommunication services. The concessionaire, the private operator, in the case of Kosovo electricity distribution and supply, was not obeying and is still do not obey the legislation, the public procurement legislation in Kosovo, even though they are legally obliged to do so. So since the company provides public services, they are legally obliged to proceed with procurement activities as per the law on public procurement. But the new owner, the new private operator, systematically failed to comply lawfully. Even though telecommunication services still remain public, and the government of Kosovo failed to privatize this company, during 2008 and 2010, they hired 820 new employees without being based upon any strategic document or any business plan that would justify such a massive employment during this period. So even though we had failed attempts in privatization, they still continued to with such I would say illicit activities. Decision-making structures have also increased their salaries, and there was no reasonable justification provided to the Kosovo's Parliament and also to the government of Kosovo as the sole owner of the current public companies in Kosovo. This is it for this presentation.